Hello. Good
Good
evening, Greg.
evening. Nice backdrop.
Yes, thank you. So's yours.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's about right, isn't it? You with a load of books, me with a load of
The
paper.
image. Yeah, it is fella 33
Yeah,
in perfect symmetry.
yes. So, as we move on with our weekly pods, and remember, please subscribe and click the like button. That's how our channel stays alive. Or
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
we've had a kind of like run of things now, and one of the threads that I think we both recognised, and then we had a talk about it afterwards last week, was our relationship to writing. So my question to kind of kick us off, because I think for both of us it would take in a lot of things. Again, probably as always, very personally, but culturally, politically, socially, and of course educationally. My question to open it up, Graham, was what do you use writing for?
The answer to that is kind of an answer to a different question, maybe, but I think it'll make sense. I use write, and it's going to sound terribly pretentious, but I'm going to have to just unapologetically declare it. I use writing to live. It is my I'm just immersed in writing, and I have been for a long time. I was thinking, as we do in between episodes, thinking of the theme we have to chew on, and it's just unlike every other topic we talked about. It's just I'm immersed in it. It is just me. There's not a day. I don't think there's probably been a day apart from crazy days where other things happen. An ordinary day where I haven't at some point done some writing, and I've probably written. Well, I have. I've written millions and millions of words over my adult life. So, writing, the purpose of writing for me is kind of living the life I have. It's a very personal thing, it's in my identity. I can't imagine any part of my life without having a go at putting something down. So, yeah, this topic for me is intensely autobiographical in a way that you encounter music's great. Let's have a chat about it. The sea is great. I visit it every day. But I mean, writing is. I mean, it is kind of language, really. I'm probably writing more than I speak most days. So it's. And when I speak, I realise how boring and cumbersome my spoken language is. And I'm thinking about.
Finally, you admitted.
Yeah, I'm not always good at talk. So yeah, I mean, writing is just everything in a way. It's the if it's put to use, it's the not living because that's like drink and water and stuff, but drink and food and stuff. But it is kind of life for me writing, even though that sounds awfully pretentious.
When did you become aware of that? I mean, yeah, I believe you totally, and it absolutely makes sense. But when were you aware there was a point where I have to write? I mean, without it being like a self-conscious, oh, I must sit down now.
Yeah,
I guess the difference between, well, you have to write to do whatever it is, get the gas turned on in your house, or writing letters as we used to, or obviously education. But there must have been a point
mm.
where this went past just tasks that you were required to do into something which, and I really am with you on this idea, it is who you are. And do you recognize a point where maybe it crossed over, or is this, it's kind of been pretty symbiotic?
Yeah. I mean, probably symbiotic because we tell ourselves stories to retrofit meaning into fairly often chaotic and contingent experiences, but I can retrofit, I think, to a certain time. And it was when I was 15, and we used to have at the last in the last year of our GCSE English language, we all had to do a 5-minute talk. The teacher just said, "Come up with a 5-minute talk," and we all present them to each other. So it's real basic stuff. I'm sure similar things happen in schools even now, unless it's all done by some sort of stupid app. It went round the room and everyone had their 5 minutes. And I'd decided to do mine on the history of stuntmen, as it was then, stuntmen in Hollywood. And I found a book in the library, it was called Stunts, and it's this huge, thick book with lots of photographs, black and white photographs of the kind of, cowboy-looking American wholesome action hero stand-ins. And I gave a talk for 5 minutes on something to do with the history of Hollywood stuntmen. One passage of which I can still remember. And we went round, and I remember the person, the boy who did it before me. He did his on my last holiday, and he'd obviously not done any work, and he just thought he'd spend 5 minutes talking about his last holiday. And he could see he was really struggling, and he was saying a load of and I can remember one of the things he said, which was when we were landing, I looked down and all the people looked like ants. And I thought, that sounds so fucking awful, and you're really doing really badly. And then I did the presentation on the Hollywood stuntmen, and it was a time when very rare for me in school. Teachers generally really didn't like me. It was when the teacher just said that was really exceptionally good. And the rest of it was a bit embarrassing, because I think the rest of the people around it was not like I was amazingly smart. It was just that I really wanted to do it. So all the other, people's, my best friend or what my dog did or whatever it was a bit embarrassing. But I thought, why have I done this? And it seems to have done so. I seem to have, for once, got approval from my teachers. So if I'm retrofitting my writing life, I think that would probably be the moment. And the passage, I'll just say before I stop, the passage I remember was that I found a particular stuntman who did a jump from a high building, and he landed off of the protective, foam or whatever, because it was totally unregulated, early stunt action stuff. He landed so badly that his shin bone pushed through the sole of his feet. And I just remember saying that in the class and getting this kind of, because it's such an image and it's such a powerful, to be able to write something about that just seemed really exciting. So yeah, that's me. That's how I'm telling my story about writing, I think. Do you have an answer to your own question?
Oh gosh, kind of maybe. I think because previously I've talked about at school and having dyslexia, and being very fond of the sound of words, and probably dodging God knows how many bullets in academia by being able to talk okay, but that didn't get you through exams. Apart from my oral French exam, which I did well in, I was useless. And so genuinely I had an absolute aversion to the written word. But strangely, I think my form of dyslexia means reading is absolutely fine. And I've subsequently understood I'm a really good proofreader. So I can actually, grammatically and spelling and everything, I can see it on the page by somebody else, but not. And I think I had no interest really in writing. I had no need. I think going to art school, we never wrote anything. There might be some sort of poetic, graffiti-esque, reflective bit of writing we might do here and there, but certainly my art education, there was no requirement to write. I think we had to do a dissertation at the end in the third year, but that was a separate it was a separate subject area we went to, and mine was shocking, awful. I mean, I remember I really wanted to write this thing, and it was awful. And it was handwritten, of course. I think there was a stipulation we had to get it typed up. And a friend told me about somebody who you could pay them and they'd type it up. And I think they gave up halfway through because they couldn't make sense of what I'd written. So it was kind of
Yeah.
a bit humiliating, really. But I
Mm.
genuinely didn't give a shit at that point. It didn't matter.
But
However,
that's in. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
after
I just
art
wanted.
school, go on. No, you should say, go on.
I want to pick up on that because that
Yeah.
is really important for me, or in terms of our discussions of writing, which are common. You are a writer, and you've written lots of very, in my humble opinion, really light-filled text,
Mm.
and elucidating text, but it doesn't follow a conventional template at all, right? I'll leave you to describe, if you wish to,
Yeah.
the forms of text you've written, but that is always something that's kind of fascinated me about your writing, is that you have a form of dyslexia, and it hasn't, because of academic forms of assessment, it hasn't fared well, but it's also produced a really important component to your art making.
Absolutely.
Um, and for me, what it did was, when I first read some of the stuff, it made me start to think about something that I'd not thought about before in terms of writing, and if I'm honest, I'm still struggling with, which is um, the let's just call it voice.
Mm.
Right? But there are, it certainly, as I became an academic and for a while was really invested in that, the forms of writing that one pursues are very tightly regulated and come with a whole series of protocols, not just about good grammar and so on, but also structure and subtle forms of semantics that one uses. And, you know, when I used to edit journals, it used to depress the hell out of me. This kind of introduction, question, literature review, brief bit of evidence, conclusion. And if the conclusion is as boring as it possibly can be, you'll probably get published. And it was really, as I started to read your writing, I realized how stale a lot of that writing was, and how conservative in a way it was. It really was so, um, in a true sense of the word, institutionalized. There were a set of rules, implicit rules that one had to follow. So the writing you did, you do. It's really, for me, very uh, enabling or challenging, depending on my mood, to think, well, I can write how I want to write. That's the whole point. I don't have to follow the guidelines of a publisher or a journal or the protocols of whatever academic publishing how it might be described. You can write in all sorts of different ways, and that's really limitlessness, I think, is really important to writing. So yeah, I wanted to pick up on
Yeah,
that
it's
point.
that's when the light sort of came on when it's probably listening to back to the music thing, the way that lyrics form ideas and they catch fragments of things, that the kind of music I listen to. So, like The Fall, for example, you'd get these kind of shards of descriptions, totally jumbled up with sort of playfulness, with all sorts of kind of intimations of something, and they were just super imaginative things, and that corresponded to how I kind of think about stuff in a way. And what you said before is like, because the writing that I do and started to do, because it wasn't for anything, those things like knowing that words have got to fit into a certain order, that carry certain punctuation and grammatical sense. Once I stopped worrying about that, suddenly words were like, woo, just flying. And then I understood that because I'm visually preoccupied with trying to engage with the way in which images can embody or carry something or express something, and understanding my own certain limitations with that, suddenly words became a way of where a kind of image failed for me. Words could actually jump in. And I saw them very much as a way of doing what I'm trying to do with making images. And suddenly realizing I could also invent characters who could embody those words. So it didn't have to be me necessarily, which then allowed me to speak through these ideas that are, for me, impossible to make as images or paint into paintings. And in a way, then writing became a way of thinking. It's like drawing for me, and I'm doing it with my hand as we speak. It's like I can't think it until it starts appearing on the page. And it has a graphic quality because it's handwritten that somehow connects a correspondence one-to-one between a thought, an idea, a mark I make, which ends up being a word or a series of words that then reflect back on myself. And that's how I've always thought about trying to make art. So suddenly that was, it was like the lights came on. And in a way, that's very close, I think, to certain poetic traditions, lyrical traditions, maybe some moments in literature. I can think of certain writers who've used a very, going back, we can see it in modernism how writing took on a new shape. But I'm not so interested in them as literature or poetry. I see them as really close to actually the paintings I'm making. Hence, when I made art books that have words in them, it is absolutely the correspondence between image and word and image. Word as images, images as words. It's just now I feel more confident to extend the words further. But I tell you, it's been a nightmare.
Yeah.
Trying to get that, it's nowhere near as grand as publishing, but to get it produced, which tend to be previously in academic contexts, I absolutely refused to do what you describe. So it was very generous support from independent galleries or museums. The one that really stood out when I did it the first proper, in a sense way, was with the University in Bergen when they invited me to create a small publication, which they did every year, about artistic research. And I agreed to do it on the basis I could have a lot of images. And they said, well, okay, we normally have, I think they said 3 images. And I said, no, it'll be very visual. And I want to write it as an interview with a very close friend who happens to be Russian about my experience, which is what they invited me to do. So I wrote the interview and it got peer reviewed, and it came back that it was full of grammatical errors. Punctuation was poor. It needed spell checking because a lot of it was phonetic, like spoken. But because it was an interview, you can't change it. So for me, there was a kind of little tick at the end of that. And the fact that I'd written the whole interview myself, it was totally fictitious, actually was the very notion of it being a piece of art. Whether it's fact or fiction doesn't matter. It's how it might open up a discussion through the words and the images. And it became suddenly then a confirmation that I'm trying to be sneaky, and a little bit, I was really chuffed about that. But actually that you could find forms to to write. It didn't do me any favours academically, of course, because the requirement was to publish my findings on making 2,300 paintings. Please give me the findings. I think we had a little blip with the interweb. So
We did.
I was talking about the academic pressure of publishing, which normally meant journals, conference papers, chapters in books, of which art doesn't fit into. Reflecting on art, which is art theory, art criticism, cultural theory, is a totally different discipline. And I kind of refuse to blur the two together. So it didn't do me any favours. But that's not a problem, you know. So tell me, like, I was thinking about this thing of words and images as words, and to me, this connection between thinking and writing. And I do write on the computer, but all the thing I'm interested in is all this stuff. It's all handwritten. So yeah, I was going to ask you, what's your relationship then to the act of writing, and are you
Yeah,
aware that different things happen in different forms of writing?
agreed. Well, there is, yes. The I'm going to hold on until you come back because you've frozen again. There you are.
Good.
The I mean, I don't think it's one of these areas where I really don't want to sound conservative, but I do wonder about. I mean, the loss of handwriting is now a fact, right? We can't assume that people can write with a pen. In fact, the ways in which people communicate, even at the level of sentence, is now questionable. The idea of composition is radically changing. That's an observation. It's generally factual, and then within that context, I think writing is something worth. Handwriting is something worth thinking about. I'll give you a short vignette story to illustrate, I think, what I'm trying to say, which was one of the last lectures I did at Durham, seminars I was doing at Durham, and everyone's on their computer, their laptops or their tablets, right, in the seminar, and they're all going blah, 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 who knows what they're doing. But, they were all doing that. And then somebody had a quite flash tablet, which had one of these apps which give you a fucking stylus that you can then write on, and it's called, my idea, or something fabulous like that, right? So it's kind of painted as a kind of, hey, write your ideas down and connect them together, or put a circle around them. And I went up to the student, who was, I think, quite pleased with their device, and said, "Oh, that's really good. I've got something a bit like that. It's called paper. See this paper here? I've got this piece of paper, and look, watch. I can just write these, and then I can draw an arrow." She was a bit annoyed with me, but I thought I was absolutely appropriately illustrating to her how she's kind of in a situation where she's forgotten and remembered the value of handwriting.
I think
Having gone through this life cycle of going digital, she's now finding herself having to work and think by using a pen and paper that's intermediated by a touch screen.
Yeah, I think the interface with the word, we know it's fundamentally different between it's handwritten on a piece of paper and the interface on a computer screen. I don't think that there's no mystery. There are big differences, and that's not a value thing. How we cognitively connect are different. But like you say, I think the fastest in history, the language that grew the fastest and with the fastest but the most amount of people in history is the emoji as a language. I was reading about that the other day, and you suddenly go, "Good grief! Can you imagine that? A language that's bigger than any language human beings have ever had, but it's grown in what 10 years or something." So I was thinking about that in relation to these kind of hieroglyphic scribbles that I make, and they're not written for anybody apart from myself. I never show people what goes on in the notebooks, but from that, I do have a kind of translating process onto the computer, and that's
Yeah,
really important to me. Is there is something between the two interfaces, and it's a kind of thinking editing space that happens. So I was thinking then about emojis, but the original language was what, cuneiform, which were like symbols pressed into ceramic tablets, weren't they? And they weren't words; they were images. And the way in which I've seen cuneiform. I'm sure you have. It's really odd to look at these shapes and how they all add up together. And the fact they're imprinted into something was their value as well. Hence, they've survived thousands and thousands of years because of clay being able to survive. And there is something in there I've been thinking about. It's like the impression a word makes on something, um, not only on your brain, but the way it comes out into the world. And like you, I use the computer for stuff that you have to do. I use my phone, and the shorthand of the phone, it's fun. I mean, but I've read essays in art school that are written like text messages now, even with emojis in between them. They're not full sentences. They're just so this thing about it's like something about the evolution of writing is it's probably a bigger subject, isn't it?
it is. But I mean, again, I think there are times when I'm quite keen to define things apart from each other. So the broader universe of symbolisms, fine. They're all over the place, and emojis are now kind of common currency. Fine. They do things that words can't do, and it's not entirely like a sign of stupidity. Although how a student can use them in a piece of written work, God only knows. But anyway, they exist. But I think written language is something else, and I don't know even if it includes cuneiform and other forms of symbolisms, because what happens, I think, if I remember correctly, the emergence of Greek and Latin languages, and there may be other languages out there that I don't know about, is the use of symbols to denote what do you call it now? I've forgotten the name of it. Anyway, noises, sounds, spoken word sounds, right? Moving from symbols that represent a number, as numbers still do. You've got the number one, and it's a straight line, and then you've got ONE, and that's a word that's kind of composed out of letters that have a phonetic. That's the word I was looking for. Phonetics, series of coordinates, right? So, language and the use of written language is sort of phonetically. Their symbols are phonetically oriented. I'm sure Arabic must be like that. Anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
That seems to me what I think of as writing, right? That it has to have this sentence, this form of composition around the sentences that are words that people use. So symbols that denote objects or ideas that can then be collated together. They don't tell you. You can't say a new word. Right, I could find a word in the dictionary I've never heard before and say it, and I can learn what it is, because it's embedded in a language, right? Everything in a language is structural theory of language is every word relies on the words around it.
Absolutely.
It seems to me that writing is something that's specific to phonetic languages composed by letters that compose words, that compose sentences. And I'm not sure that other forms of symbolism, which are obviously very interesting and so on, do that.
I was thinking what you said, the metaphorical sense of language. One, the one, and then O-N-E. And there's a lot. Well, I mean, you're probably way more on it than me. But the study of language and language as metaphor is something that's a word can only stand in for something. Like the word cough isn't a cough; it's a stand-in for the. And like you say, then the way in which whatever is either side of it, I turned round and coughed is different from I want to cough, and then you build up this understanding. And I was thinking about a lot of I think the writing that I end up doing, is it the right word, palimpsest?
Palimpsest?
Yes. Yeah, it's kind of this constant overwriting of things. And sometimes quite literally, I'll be writing over the top of what I've already written. But it's almost like, again, like a drawing. I did look at this once and where it came from, which is interesting, because obviously there wasn't paper, so there were these tablets that you used to use in commerce, and you'd write down how many of these, and then you'd scrub it out, and then you'd have to write on top of it again, and it would slowly build up this. I mean, look, we can look at it now almost aesthetically as a really interesting way of accumulating something. And it's very close to painting for me, the idea that you're constantly overlaying on top of things and leaving a trace of what's there becomes part of what's on top of it. And I think about writing like that as well, I think. And if I did ever, I do occasionally go back, normally when I'm halfway through a book and one of these notebooks, and go, what the fuck have I been doing? Because they are like an aid memoir, but it's an emotional aid memoir. And I realise how many times I write the same thing. It's weird. And in a way, it's just to reassert something sometimes. And again, it's like, I am really limited in these things I hover around. And sometimes by writing it, I can leave it alone. But clearly there are times I just keep going back to the same things over and over and over. And again, they're not written for instruction, like, oh, I must remember to do this. And since we were going to talk about this, I was thinking, bloody hell, I've got thousands of these notebooks. What am I going to do with them? Well, I just put them in the bin because they don't have any value. I can't do that right now because there's stuff in there that occasionally, it's useful to go back. And I update things all the time. So I might start an idea and then it goes on and I keep updating it. So to have it as a reference point is useful. But beyond that, and I only have one notebook. I don't have multiple notebooks where this is for this and this is for that and this is for this. So that was another thing I was going to... Well, it's a question really. Do you just... It's like a single ongoing thing you're writing, or is it important that you keep sort of distinction or discipline between knowing today I'm going to that bit of writing or I'm going to this bit of writing? Or do you have to just keep writing and then backwards edit, okay, this belongs over here and this belongs over there?
Yeah. I mean, I do have fairly clear boundaries. I'm still trying to write some non-fiction, even though I'm trying very hard to get published in fiction, and that's proving to be remarkable and exciting and largely unsuccessful process that I'm enjoying a great deal. But in terms of actually, I mean, so the distinctions are there for me very clearly, and I do have several notes for different things for that reason. But particularly since I was released from um, wage slavery, I've found myself best equipped to write what I want to write. So that really depressing thing I used to have as part of my life, where an editor of a journal would say, "Make these revisions to your article," many of which I wouldn't agree with.
I
You have
remember
to
you
kind
talking
of put
about it.
up with it. Make these revisions to the article, and in order for us to get it into the publishing line, give us the revisions in 2 months or whatever it is. So there would be times, usually on a Sunday evening, where I'd sit down with this piece of work I by now hated, that I'd written, that had been edited at least twice over by myself, and now I had these referees' comments, some of which, and this is not just me being fussy. Nobody agrees with all their referees' comments.
No.
Some of which you don't agree with, and you think, well, fuck the article up, and then having to sit down and write, cull paragraphs, rewrite paragraphs, do extra bits of research to kind of put extra buttressing into what you're saying that actually don't really, apart from academic fastidiousness, don't do anything for the idea you're trying to communicate. And I mean, what a horrible way to write. And since I've not had to do that, I will always write, but I will think, what's the mood, what's the motivation, and if it's, I've got an idea about what someone might say in the storybook I'm writing, it'll be that. Or if it's, I must write that thing down that I have about some of the non-fiction stuff I'm doing, then I'll write that, and I'm thinking, I don't know if that's right, and I'm immersed in it then. So yeah, I just go with what the muse tells me to go with, and it usually works out, at least in terms of me enjoying it. It usually works out pretty well. Yeah, so clear boundaries, but also no routines at all. I just go with what seems to be the push, really.
I think we're getting close to the end of this part. One
Yeah,
thing you brought up at the beginning, which perhaps is something we can develop, because I think again across the pods that we've been casting, I think there is very distinct. There's a distinct moment going on with both of us. I think in our where we are and what we're doing and what's forming for all sorts of reasons, relocating where you live to shifting lifestyle choices, chances, all that stuff. But it's something about the voice, and you brought it up earlier about your voice. So either that, like writing is a formal exercise that you need to do, and like you need to go to the gym. It's just something you have to do. It's part of you. Or you're using writing as a means to express or to navigate or to communicate or to attach to these things you're pushing at. It's about, like you say, being alive. And with that comes this question of voice, doesn't it? About how loud, quiet, how do you pitch that voice? And is it more than one voice? And I think that's a really interesting, because I think before you stopped teaching, I remember talking to you, we were in the pub one night, and asking you, do you think this will affect your voice? Or will it change the way you think about? Because modest as you are, you were clearly a very successful academic in terms of published material. And you've won awards for your books, and you've been sought after and talked about by people because of, something clearly connecting to people. And I hear your frustration with that. And perhaps in our education pods, we talked about that as well. And in a way, the economic model it's turned into has just squashed a lot of the really interesting things that were possible. But clearly now it's a kind of, wow, what an opportunity. No one's telling you to do anything. It's the sort of illusion we kind of aspire to. I just want to do what I want, but that's a nightmare. Because choice becomes both enabling but disabling. So technically you can get up and do whatever you want. And how do we begin to understand, well, I don't just want one thing often. There are multiple things, and each have potentially slightly different voices. So that to me is like massive in what I'm trying to do. Hence behind me, there are multiple things that on paper don't fit together. And yet I'm trying to push them together to form this new relationship. And I see that exactly in what you're trying to do. But obviously our language, what we're using, there's means, methods are different. But I'd be really interested to talk more about that.
Yeah. Well, it would be part 2 of writing, wouldn't it?
You've got it.
Because it's loads of things that I've got here, which I think would be great to talk about as well. So yeah, I think there's enough for a 2-parter with this one.
I think we're on it, Graham. I think we need to run.
Yeah, good.
All right. In between that, I hope your writing goes well.
Thank you, and right back at you.
Right, back at you.
Okay, yes, thank you. Had to be something, didn't there? For the bells and whistles. You need a few bells and whistles in a podcast. Absolutely. Right, I'm going to extinguish our presence now, and we'll catch you all next
time.
week. Yeah.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye.